Okay, well, fine with me. I just have to turn off my air conditioner when we turn on the recording.
Okay. With your air conditioner off, does that mean we're sweating to the oldies?
Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers, available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the Greek interpreter interpreted, the Norwood builder built, and the Reigate squires puzzled, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
How many disguises did Sherlock Holmes use? What were the street Arabs? And how did he get information from his underground network?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 490, Entombment. Well, hello there, and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we get into the details of the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And Burt, are you feeling close and muggy there in your office?
Yes, and it's odd. I just opened up a fresh cask of Amontillado, too.
Ooh. That's best experienced at the basement level, if you can. Yeah.
Yes, in the catacombs, right next to the dogacombs.
And the cat of brushes.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we're not going to put you through too much more of this. We're going to get right to the show. We are exploring a piece of Sherlockian scholarship. That's right. It is the Mr. Sherlock Holmes the Theorist week of the month. And here in Season 10, we are all about sharing Sherlockian scholarship with you. In this case, we delve into the back issues of Baker Street Miscellanea, looking at Spring 1990, issue number 61. Denise M. Rogers has inspired us. Exactly what does she have in store and what will we be talking about? Well, stay with us. We just ask that if you have the means to support us, you can do it for as little as $1 a month. $10 a year if you want to take out an annual version of our plan. Every little amount helps, and it makes it possible for us to do this show on a regular basis, to put in the research, to have the prizes, the costs associated with running a show. You know what it's all about. But your generosity is appreciated, and you can do that from the likes of Patreon or Substack. You pick whichever one works for you, whichever amount works for you. Check us out at patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com. If you don't want to stick with us month after month or for a full year, then take out as many months as you feel comfortable. We are more than happy to work with you on whatever works for you. And we do appreciate every little amount. So, thank you. Okay, Burt, we find ourselves in the pages of the Spring 1990 Baker Street Miscellanea with a piece by Denise Rogers called Crypts, Secret Rooms, and Subterranean Passageways, Entombment as a motif in the canon. Ooh.
Yes. Well, she begins by pointing out connection between Edgar Allan Poe and Conan Doyle. Conan Doyle, of course, was frequently acknowledged and saluted Edgar Allan Poe as a great innovator and master of the short story. and said he and many other writers were quite indebted to him. And Denise begins by pointing out that in A Study in Scarlet, Conan Doyle is sort of tipping his hat to the father of the detective story because of the tale of Auguste Dupin, Poe's detective of murders in the Rue Morgue. And it's a motif common to both writers is this theme of entombment as a vehicle for the enactment of vengeance and for the concealment of truth. And so in this piece, Denise is going to go on and look at 3 stories in the canon, and there could be many more, which we will talk about, that show this in action. Shoscombe Old Place, The Retired Colorman, and The Musgrave Ritual. And in Shoscombe Old Place, the daring and dashing Sir Robert Norberton conceals the death of his ailing and aged sister, Lady Beatrice, by secretly burying her body in the family crypt, displacing the remains of some earlier ancestor in the deepest part of the tomb. And she reminds us about the plot, the suspicions of the horse trainer John Mason, and Holmes's investigation to discover the truth behind all of this. And in fact, Lady Beatrice had succumbed to an illness, and because the estate was entailed to her, it would fall into the hands of Sir Robert's debtors with the winnings of his colt, Shoscombe Prince. And so Sir Robert felt he had no choice. Well, of course he had a choice, but he had no choice but to conceal the fact of her death from the public. And she points out that Watson makes no bones about telling us that Sir Robert is a man displaced in his era, a man who would have been more comfortable in the Regency than in Victorian England. And she talks about his reckless style of living and so on. And, she does a profile here of Sir Robert that makes him, very much a character that could well be part of a Poe kind of tale.
Yeah, and the thing is, there's two issues, I think, and Denise points them out. One, she said, Holmes tells Sir Robert that he finds his conduct inexcusable, but he may be unforgiving for a number of reasons. First, to gamble with your own money, well, that's one thing. That's between you and your conscience. But when you gamble with someone else's money, that is in the realm of the unethical. And in this case, we have Sir Robert gambling with his sister's fortune. So, and he's performed the ultimate act of hiding behind a woman's skirts, as she said. Lady Beatrice has been helping her brother to hide his winnings from his debtors, at least avoiding his creditors, I should say. And Holmes, probably didn't have sympathy for that. These are the landed gentry. He didn't really take kindly to this class of society anyway, and he would have imagined that somebody with Sir Robert's opportunities, he could have made more of himself, or should have at least taken responsibility for his own actions and his debts. And second, despite Holmes's unconventionality, well, we have conventionally Victorian kind of attitudes that he did have. He's extremely protective of codes of behavior, and he's kind of bound by the proper activities, except when he decides not to be, right? But Sir Robert's concealment of Lady Beatrice's death and his failure, this is the real egregious part, his failure to lay the lady to rest appropriately is inexcusable. And perhaps this is when Holmes relents, after Sir Robert's explanation of his behavior, for although he threatened to expose the events, he didn't do so in a manner that would bring Sir Robert's creditors down on his head. And Watson tells us that at the end of the story, the creditors are allayed, Sir Robert reestablished himself in fair position, And aside from having getting a mild censure for the delay in reporting Lady Beatrice's death, he got away unscathed. But Watson does hint that Sir Robert did far more than reestablish himself. In the final line of the story, he notes that Sir Robert's career outlived its shadows and promises to end in an honored old age. So the shadows are his gambling debts and the misfortune he had in the first place. And then Watson's referring to the man's haunting refusal to accept responsibility for the events that put him into these strange circumstances in the first place. What was buried is exhumed. Sir Robert's honor and acceptance of duty.
Boom, boom, boom. Well, and then Denise takes us to one of the real stinkers in the canon, Josiah Amberley, of the retired colorman. And this is interesting it's interesting for a variety of reasons. One is that, spoiler alert, we will soon find out that Holmes's client, Amberley, is in fact the murderer. And what's happened here, of course, is that he has considerably mistreated his wife. He has apparently won her through false generosity. He ensnares her, gains control of her income. She doesn't have any personal freedom. So, she's really highly isolated. And he's a miser. His passions are money and chess and his wife. And when she leaves his confines and finds a lover, he exacts this terrible revenge and then goes to Sherlock Holmes, which, points to, odd kind of ego, wanting to, the challenge of beating the police, to test Sherlock Holmes, to celebrate his revenge in a way. And of course, this is a character who's carrying around a cyanide capsule. But in any case, what happens here, of course, is that he's built himself a little indoor gas chamber, as one might, and has done away with his wife and her lover, and then cleaned up as best he could afterwards, and taken their bodies elsewhere. And of course, at the end of it, it all comes out. But here again, you've got this sort of creepiness, particularly in a Shoscombe Old Place, this whole idea of taking your sister's corpse down to the crypt and moving one of the residents there and making a room and putting her in there. And here, we have another case of Amberley murdering his wife and her lover, and then laboriously taking their bodies out and disposing of them outside the house and so on. And it's, it would not be unusual for you, listeners, who have read a lot of Victorian Gothic literature to say, there are themes here that seem familiar. And then Denise takes us to the Musgrave Ritual, which is another, in the basements of Victorian England, strange things happen, which is another terrific example of this sort of subterranean falderall.
Yeah, you'll recall that Rachel Howells, the housemaid, is fed up with Brunton's romanticisms with other members of the household staff, and she takes out her rage on him by sealing him in a tomb beneath Hurlstone Manor.
Yeah.
Well, she said it may not have been difficult for Rachel to justify her actions had she not done womankind a great favor. It's likely that she learned of the discovery of Brunton's body, but unlike Sir Robert Norberton or Josiah Amberley, Rachel never had to confront the fact that her darkest secret had come to light. So is it not particularly consoling to think that in the discovery of Brunton's body, Holmes discovers the gold fragments of the crown and the jewels? They are old and unlovely and doomed to concealment in some other dark place. Brunton represents a man who has gone after another man's secret. Holmes probably felt some sympathy for him. Digging around in other men's secrets was a career for Holmes, but it may have been a warning to him about choosing your companions wisely. But, aside from these lessons that we draw from Shoscombe Old Place and the Retired Colorman and the Musgrave Ritual, there are other stories where people are not necessarily entombed, but, perhaps find themselves in secret rooms and subterranean passageways and whatnot. Can you think of any others like that, Bert?
Oh, sure. Well, the archetype for that, I think, is the Norwood Builder, where we have Jonas Oldacre, another one who's attempting to get revenge on someone. And in this case, it's the son of a woman who spurned him. And he has faked his own death, not particularly convincingly. And he is hiding in a secret room in his house, which he will eventually be literally smoked out of. And there are other examples of these sort of Victorian secret rooms. Of course, the Golden Pince-Nez, we've got somebody who's hiding in a secret room or a seat behind a hidden door. And, you could say that Copper Beeches, too, where you've got Jeffro Rucastle's daughter Alice, who it turns out is being kept a prisoner at the top of the house. And then...
I like how Denise calls this a variation on the fairy tale Rapunzel.
Yeah. But she's had to cut off her hair, so she can't let it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately. And then the engineer's thumb, you don't usually think of this as a hidden room, but this entombment or this closeness, the real great scene in the engineer's thumb is when poor old Hatherley is almost crushed by the press. He's in the press. And like the old silent films, the walls are coming down on him.
Yes.
And he's facing, being squashed to death until finally he just sneaks out thanks to some assistance there.
It is very Poe-like. I
terrifying.
think of the Pit and the Pendulum kind of a thing. It's, death is approaching and there's no escape. And see, this is where I think in this piece, Denise kind of buried the lead. She opened with a mention of Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
But never really set the stage for exactly what she was talking about. Now, for those who have read an extensive amount of Poe, you understand. But here she mentions the Cask of Amontillado. And we're given, she writes a picture of a particularly gruesome form of revenge, the walling up of a man, right? So this is the original Buried Alive story. And it's cleverly and enticingly written, she says. It capitalizes on the fact that subconsciously, man erects walls between his conscious self and those things he no longer wants to deal with. At night, at times when he's alone, one can hear, perhaps even chooses to summon the sounds that are proof of their existence behind that wall. And here she calls back to Conan Doyle, writing on this subject. What is it that we are conscious of? What secrets are we conscious of that we no longer wish to hear? The sound of our secrets trying to get out? Or do we hear the hammering of our conscious mind trying to get in?
Well, these are great themes, that sort of run through Gothic literature, and we've mentioned that too. But, for example, Anne Radcliffe is an author of what you might call female Gothic literature. And in her stuff, the oddest things, domestic and familiar spaces, sort of become prisons through which her protagonists have to escape. And the women seem very entrapped. And, Entombment, it goes far beyond all the graveyards. It's these castles and abbeys and haunted houses and things like that. I remember Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, sort of one of these places with lots of ancestral crypts and catacombs. And what happens there is that these spaces, the grave, it's kind of like symbols of trauma and forbidden things and forbidden desires and things that refuse to remain silent. And it's, the past just sort of never stays buried. And in Usher, I think in Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, I can't remember who the character is. I think it's Madeline, but she's sort of locked up by her brother, but she's not dead. She's sort of entombed, and then, if I remember right, she comes back, and then. But my favorite of these things, oddly enough, the one that I always remember isn't really Gothic literature at all. It's comedy. It's the comedy of terrors. There was this picture in the 1960s with Vincent Price and Peter Lorre and Boris Karloff, and a cameo by Joe E. Brown. And I think it was Peter Lorre's last movie, and I think it was Joe E. Brown's last movie. But Rathbone is in it.
Yes.
And what happens here is that Vincent Price is sort of a bumbling and unsuccessful funeral director, and Peter Lorre is his not very capable assistant. And Rathbone is the landlord, and he is desperately afraid of being buried alive. And so throughout the picture, he's believed dead and put in a coffin, and always awakes to the same phrase. You'll hear him say,
What place is this?
And in fact, I think that's the last line of the movie. I think he's probably for the third or fourth time he's boxed up, and as the credits are rolling, I think you hear, What place is this? But it's, it sort of makes fun of the whole thing, which was cute.
That's fantastic. Well, there is no place like this, because that is just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
It was a close and muggy day. There had been 3 muggings in the lobby since dawn. I wisely kept to my room, but there came a sudden beating at my door.
Oh, what? Well, I'll get it.
No, it's part of the story.